Hello, everyone who's joining us. I'm going to give it a moment so that we can sort of populate everyone who is already in attendance. I want to thank you all. This is going to be an exciting conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. And yeah, I'm gonna count in my head to about, I don't know, maybe 15, and then we'll officially kick this off. It's great. We have a solid group to start off with, so this is really cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Dexter Wimberly. I'm a senior critic at New York Academy of Art. I'm very honored to host many of the lectures and visiting artists that come to the school, and also we do a lot of these things online. Today, we're joined by a fantastic artist who I met not a very long time ago, but was immediately struck by her work and fascinated by her story. And so it was really fantastic when she agreed to participate in today's conversation. Jessica Vollrath was born in 1984 to an African-American father and a Mexican mother. She grew up in a uniquely diverse household with 11 siblings, a Mennonite background, and a homeschool education. She discovered her love of painting around the age of 8, spending her free time experimenting with various art supplies her mother found at garage sales. She primarily works in oil paint, but has also explored a variety of other media, including sculpture, latex, and works on paper. Initially trained as a figurative art, she began her career as a commissioned portrait painter. Guided by her love of light, color, and the human figure, Vollrath creates biographical works that explore humankind's eternal search for connection and immortality. She currently lives in Dallas with her husband and 2 daughters and serves as an adjunct professor at Eastfield College. Please join me in welcoming Jessica Vollrath to today's conversation. Jessica, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing extremely well. So I always think that anyone who shows up to this conversation or these kinds of conversations probably want to hear less of me and more of you. So
Okay.
I would love I would love for you to take a minute or two and just obviously I've just read your bio, right? But take a minute or two and introduce yourself. Kind of share the info you usually provide to people when they ask you about who you are and the work that you do.
Awesome. Well, thank you first for having me. Thank you for everyone who's joining. I'm very honored to be here. A little bit about myself that has not been shared. Well, of course, I think first and foremost, I'm someone still very much on a journey. The idea of arriving somewhere, haven't arrived anywhere. So this whole life experience is still very exciting, and my growth as an artist, as a human, as a mother, as a wife. So yeah, I currently teach at this is my first semester teaching. I usually teach basic drawing, but I'm teaching life drawing this semester at Dallas College. I'm very excited about that. I've got 2 little girls that keep me extremely busy. So usually I spend my days mothering them, and I spend the latter part of my days in the studio working. I'm also starting my first year as an art teacher at their preschool, so it's really exciting, and working on a solo exhibition that opens at the beginning of April. So very, very busy, but doing things that I love. So it's exciting.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, um, we have quite a bit of your work in a slide presentation that we'll get to during the conversation, just to let everyone know we will be looking at art. We will be talking about art. But one of the reasons I was really excited about having this conversation with you, Jessica, was some of what you just described. You have a lot of roles, right? Obviously, you're an artist. That's why we're here. But you're a teacher, you're a mother, you're a wife, you're part of your community. You have a lot of different things going on. And I think it's important for artists, whether they are significantly younger than you and thinking about the future, your age, kind of dealing with the present, or significantly older than you and still trying to figure out how to navigate certain aspects of the art world. I think it's important to talk about balancing all of these different roles, right?
Hmm.
How do you center your art within this whole constellation, let's call it, of responsibilities and goals that you have? So I know it's a heavy question, like how do you center your art in the midst of all of these things? But if you would try to tackle it, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, let's try to do that. So going back to a little bit back when I was a child, growing up the way we did, we didn't have traditional entertainment. So we never watched movies. We didn't go to school traditionally. So I was at home mainly. And with all of that downtime, I spent it drawing. So I think a lot of the formation of my personality, I learned to express myself through that art form. So carrying that with me throughout my life has always been something that was very vital. And so as I grew older, and whoever has this figured out, I never had it figured out, right? I just knew that I wanted to stay close to whatever kept me close to art. And so um, I left home at 19, went to California. Of course, everyone goes to California when they're running away from home. I worked as a waitress, and I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I just knew I had to paint, right? And so I was a waitress and making money, and I was like, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to take every art class that's possible. And I took every art class that was possible. And that eventually turned into me pursuing a higher education, a higher degree. But then jumping to now, so I kept painting close. It's almost I explain it as like a meditative practice. It wasn't
Mm,
even something I did for money. It was something I had to do. It was the way I stayed connected to myself. It was the way I figured out what was going on in my own brain. It was the way I calmed myself. And so that was never an option, right? Not doing art was not an option. And so after I became a mother in 2019, I think that's when everything really changed because I no longer had these large chunks of time that belonged to me. Because creating that habit over time, when I had downtime, I didn't watch shows, I didn't scroll Instagram. I wasn't really, I was always wanted to be in my studio. That was how I had my downtime. So after becoming a mother, all that was gone. And I really struggled. And I went through a period of postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. And
yeah.
I feel like like the person I knew, I felt like I had died. I know that sounds really dramatic, but I just did not know how to center myself. And so tried a lot of things. My husband was working a corporate job at the time, and so there was really just not time. I had my babies back to back. It was during COVID. There was, yeah. So eventually, him and I came to the table when I really was not doing well. And he's like, "You have to go back to the studio." And I was like, with what time? I have two little kids, and he's like, "We have to make this a priority." So I do have to thank my husband for helping me recenter in that way, because it felt like such a luxury. And as any parent would know, when you have something like that is not directly related to like taking care of your children and your family, that is a luxury. And so luckily, like I said, I have an incredible partner who was like, I'm going to take the kids, you go to the studio. And so my studio time started late at night after the babies would go to bed, and I would just go and I would paint. And I felt myself coming back to life. And that was really amazing. And my gallerist at the time, I was still kind of posting on Instagram, but the career as I had known it felt like it was dead. Like no one was watching, no one cared. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea what I was talking about. I was just like a mom that was extremely postpartum in my studio. I was painting magnetiles. Like I felt so lost. And my gallerist at the time, she had called me and she says, "Hey, if you're up for the challenge, I want to commission a solo exhibition. You have 4 months." And I was like, let's go. So I'm so grateful to her as well for realizing that I needed a reason. Like she's like, I knew you needed a reason to go to the studio. And art for me and creating for me is vital. And so she gave me that reason. And so I think that was in um I don't remember the exact date of that show. Maybe it was 2020, 2021. It's slipping my mind at the moment.
Sure.
I think my youngest was still, maybe not even a year old. So after I went into that challenge head on, felt myself coming back to life, I realized that regardless of my life situation, regardless of the new roles that kept piling on, part of retaining myself was that creative process. And so, as that show was being developed, my partner and I both decided together that we were always going to prioritize that for me. We were always going to give time for that. So, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to make breakfast. I'm going to take care of my babies, but there will always be a chunk of the day where he would take over so I could do that. And so we've kind of built our family life around that, allowing each other that space and time. And so I feel incredibly fortunate that I don't have to battle for that now, and it is literally built into our day. So the way we handle it, we both, my husband works from home. He takes the first part of the day. I'm primary parent. Then middle of the day we switch. He becomes primary parent, and I am artist Jess. And our kids have been raised that way, so they know when Mama's in the studio and her headphones are on, everything goes to Daddy, right? So I feel incredibly fortunate, wildly lucky, and this whole growth and experience in the last like year and a half comes specifically from that experience of going through postpartum, feeling like I had died, and then coming back to life again, kind of as a new person with new courage and a new appreciation for what art meant to me.
Thank you for sharing that. It's so good to hear what other people are dealing with and how they are meeting the challenges of life in
Mm-hmm.
relation to being a creative person. And the reason I asked that question was I thought it would be a good way to sort of unpack how you've navigated all of that, right? Because even if someone doesn't have any children and they don't have a partner, whether married or otherwise, we're still sort of dealing with all of the pressures of life. And I often talk to artists who are kind of not clear about whether they're being utterly selfish to carve out this time for themselves, right? Or whether they are not prioritizing their creative life enough. And so I think it's
Mm-hmm.
great to kind of talk about that a bit more. And it does connect directly to professional development, professional practices, because in a way, no matter what you learn academically, you still have to deal with the world.
Yeah.
The world doesn't care what degree you have. The world doesn't care how talented you are. The world, whether it's your partner, your quote unquote boss or your babies, they want what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to fight. You have to fight for the space to do what you need to do to be healthy, mentally healthy as it relates to your creative work. So let's talk a little bit about your professional journey, right? So obviously that opportunity to have that solo show was really important because it forced you to prioritize with deadlines, right?
Yes.
Deadlines are great. I love deadlines because it really does really kind of makes you know what you're made of.
Yes.
When you have a deadline, right? It's one thing to be in the studio painting with no deadline. But let's talk about your professional journey a bit more. So, how did, even though you said it's your former gallery, how did you get connected with an art gallery? I met you last year in Dallas while I was visiting the Dallas Art Fair, which was a fantastic art fair, and a lot of artists love to be shown at, an art fair like that. So, talk a little bit about these touch points in your professional journey.
Okay. I'd love to. So, like I said, when I started out, I didn't know that an art career was possible, in the sense that I understand it now. I just knew I wanted to be an artist. So, there's a million ways to make money as an artist. And I think for me, that took a really long time to figure out because it was so attached to my own personal way of expressing myself that making money off of it felt I didn't even know how to figure that out. So as I went through my education and I got my bachelor's degree. I wasn't even, I got my bachelor's degree from Howard University, and from there I moved straight to New York, to New York City. And what I thought I could do with a bachelor's degree, I was like, oh, I can work at a gallery, right? I just wanted to be close to art. But at that point, being a painter the way I'm a painter now was such a distant dream. Like that is the dream of any artist, right? I just want to paint for a living. And that was like, how do you do that? You think of Andy Warhol, you think of all these giants in art, and the way they got there is such a mystery because the road is so personal, right? So my dream at that time was like, I'm going to work. I'm gonna be in proximity. So I actually worked at Christie's Art Auction House. I was an art handler. I worked as an intern from some galleries, did some press releases. Worked as an intern at I believe it was the Independent Art Fair at the time. And I was 26 at the time. And so I was kind of a late bloomer in the fact of, in that sense of just graduating with a bachelor's of fine arts. But, and then late at night, I would go home and paint and sketch and do things. As life moved on and a lot of things happened, and I found myself back in Dallas. And, I have this bachelor's degree in art. I was believed I was like 29 at the time. I had the dissolution of a really long-term relationship. I was pretty lost, and so I was like, okay, I have no prospects. What do I do now? And I'm like, okay, I want to stay close to art. So I'm going to go get my master's degree because then I can teach art. And so I went to Texas Women's University, started pursuing my master's degree. And I think for me, that is when an art career as I now see it started, like the possibility of it started opening up. So I was working um on my thesis show. I had never had that much committed time to just explore all of these different mediums. I was working in sculpture and I was doing some really exciting work. And that started getting a little attention. And so as I was showing at the college gallery, um, oh, yes, and I started an Instagram. And so before then I had no social media. I'm not sure even when social media started actually, but I got an Instagram in about 2017. I believe I opened that up. And so for me, that was the first time I started sharing my work to a larger audience, the audience being maybe like 200 people. Um, but I was doing good work. I was doing exciting work. At that time, I was 30, uh, some early 30s, 30, 31. And so my work was mature, beginning to mature. And so from that is how my first gallery found me. And so she was like, hey, I work for this gallery. It's a gallery out of Fort Worth. And she's like, I would love to do a solo exhibition with you. And so I did my first solo exhibition right out of grad school. And
Mhm.
in all honesty, Dexter, it was a flop, meaning that I didn't sell one piece. The
Uh-huh.
pieces were beautiful.
Uh-huh.
It was huge. I mean, I think I made like 32 pieces for that show. It
Wow.
was so much fun. I had never done anything so grand, and it was just, I had a blast. I had a blast. I didn't sell one piece. And so I came off of that being like, okay, that felt really good. I didn't sell a piece. Am I still going to do this? And I think this is the part where this is the make or break, right? Because our society tells us if you can't make money off what you do something else, right? And sometimes I think that, when you're in that creative process, it's not about money. It's about like, how do you want to show up in the world? Like, what is that vehicle that takes your voice out into the world? What is important to you? Art was important to me. So after that solo exhibition, um, I sat with myself and I was like, wow, did I fail? And I didn't. to me, I didn't fail. And I knew that if there was a chance in hell, I was going to make it. Right. So I think that's where I really dug my heels in and said, this is what I want. I'm going to figure out how to make it work. And I'm not going to give up. And so I think that's where it began. And that first initial where she kind of found me out of nowhere felt really lucky. That was a really lucky break. And then after that, it was a lot of hard work of me showing up every day for myself in the studio. And then after that is when I had my children and I had to go through that reemergence, right? Of reprioritizing and saying, wow, I really need this. I really need this in my life. And so um, I would say that is how the career started. And after, she was a great contact and she got me with other contacts, and I was in some really great shows, group shows with some really amazing artists. And so that is where my art career blossomed, began. And I would say for any artist who's ever had a solo show where you don't sell one piece, that feels like that should be the end. But that was the beginning. So,
Well, thank you. I mean, there are a lot of artists that have exhibitions that sell very little.
mhm,
First time out the gate. It's not uncommon, but what is uncommon is for someone to see that and still not give up. And also to realize that there are certain circumstances that are outside of your control. I often feel that when an artist has an exhibition with a gallery, and I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but your job is to make the best work you can
mhm,
and to feel confident about that work. And the gallery's job is to sell the work. Um, doesn't mean that the artist can't play a role in that. It doesn't mean that the artist can't sort of work collaboratively with the gallery around strategy in terms of what will be the best types of works, the best size, talk about pricing, those kind of tactical things that do matter. But ultimately, the partnership between an artist and a gallery, in my mind, is one where the artist's job is to make the best possible work, and the gallery's
mhm,
job is to sell said work. And if the work doesn't sell, it's not always a reflection on the work. Sometimes it is, but oftentimes it is not. And there are countless stories of artists that we all have heard of, that we all admire early in their career, having similar situations as you, where their first couple of shows did not do well, or even later on, they have a show and it does marginally okay. But then a few years later, they're on top of the world. So it is important to stay grounded and focused on the fact that someone buying your work from your first or second or even third gallery exhibition is not a true indication of your potential
mhm.
uh, as an artist, right? So a couple of things. I'd like to start looking at some of your work and talking about it. So if you want to get the presentation queued up, that would be great. And then I have
Awesome.
a follow-up question before we start talking about the paintings.
I am ready to share my screen when
Sure,
you
you can go ahead
are.
and share your screen. Also
Awesome.
want to once again thank everyone who's here. I see some very positive comments in the chat. If folks do have a couple of questions, they can drop them into the chat. I'll try to get to them. If I don't, I apologize. I'll do my best.
Give me just a second. Where did I go? You Can you see my screen yet, Dexter?
Yeah, and maybe you go to full screen at the bottom of that window you have open.
Oh, there you go.
That should,
There we go.
yeah, and you can probably use your down arrow, I think.
Oh,
Um,
oh, there we go. I
yeah,
got it.
that'll
Figured
do
it
it.
out.
Do it. So before we start talking about the work, I do want to ask one more follow-up question. So, what's going on in Dallas? Like, tell me about the Dallas art scene. Like, how'd you end up in Dallas? And I was there last year. I may be back there soon, but I'm just kind of curious. Like, what's your take on like the Dallas art scene?
I think the Dallas art scene, first of all, I think there are a lot of people here in Dallas that are wildly talented and are not seen, I think people get the idea of Dallas and you think that the best talent is in New York or LA. But and while that can be the truth, there are some wildly talented people in Dallas that I'm honored to know and call friends. So first of all, the Dallas scene is just chock full of a lot of really talented, interesting artists that I've been so lucky to get to know. I'm excited to continue to get to know. And it's still a relatively small scene from what I understand it as. So it's really easy to, as an artist, and what I tell a lot of my students when they're like, how do we get out there? Just get out into that, just go to galleries, find shows, follow artists that you enjoy, go to their openings, see who's around. And I think it's really actually quite the Dallas art scene is very welcoming, right? And so it's really um, easy to plug into that group that you think is most representative of who you are or who you want to be. So I have found Dallas to be extremely inviting, so encouraging. I mean, the patrons, the other artists, the gallerists literally have just brought me back to life. And so yeah, I think Dallas has a lot of exciting things happening.
That's great. That's great. So let's talk about this piece here, and I prompt you to advance to the next when we're ready.
Okay. So this piece here is probably one of the most significant for me at because it really shows a transition between what I was making before and before I had that really personal transformation of becoming a mother to after. What makes this really different is that before I started making this more biographical work, I was really interested in painting others. I rarely ever painted myself. Um, I was really interested. I think my first solo exhibition was around, I had people submit selfies from all over the world, and I painted other people's selfies, and I was really interested in other people's stories. And so the work wasn't necessarily personal. And so after I became a mother, and I did that during COVID, and there was really nobody around, and I a lot of stuff happened. Like I think in life we all have these moments of like massive transformation where we have the opportunity to become something more. And I think that's different for everyone. So I want to say for me, it was motherhood. And I know that's not for everyone, but for me, becoming a mother was one of the most life altering moments I've had. And so it really forced me to dig internally um, and find the person I wanted to be. Not only who I wanted to be in the world, but the woman I wanted to model for my daughters. And I did a whole bunch of soul searching, and I really found peace in a lot of things I had struggled with in my younger years. I healed the relationship with my parents that had not necessarily been strained, but had been distanced. Yeah, so a lot of things happened. And so this painting was the first painting I did after just coming back and being like, I want to show up in the world as authentically as possible. And I want to paint work that comes from the depths of my soul. And I actually dreamed this painting, and this was that first painting, and it just poured out of me. And so this painting is really significant to me personally. And as you can see, it's called Between Me and the Gods. And it's basically talking about all of the stuff between that gets between us and that soul journey, and everything that comes between, whether it's status or money or institutions of power or beauty or whatever it is that clouds that space between our soul and the divine. And so that's what this painting is about.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's advance to the next image.
Okay. Thought I had this worked out. Okay, there we go. Here's just a detail on that. A lot of people ask about these different ribbons, so I'll go through them really fast. That first ribbon is the sound frequency of a high-pitched scream. That next ribbon, of course, is money. That next ribbon our pearls, which I kind of considered as a beauty, the pursuit of beauty. Then we have, of course, a gold chain, which is wealth. And then we have an umbilical cord and blood, which is family ties. We have the institutions of power, which are personally institutions of power that I have been associated with. I'm American. I was raised Christian, from Texas. My mother's Mexican, so on and so forth. And then, of course, on the top of that is a skeleton, which represents our own mortality. And if I keep
Wonderful.
going.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. All right. This next one is again, this was that biographical work. So this is actually a work of me and my little sister, me and my sisters, three of my sisters. And again, this was being raised really, really religiously, extremely conservatively. It's very hard to separate my stories from um, more spiritual narratives. And so I'm just leaning in. So tell them you are my sister. There is a verse in the Bible um, where Abraham and his wife go to Egypt, and he's afraid that because she is so beautiful, um, that they're going to kill him and take her. And so he says to her, "When you meet the king, tell them that you are my sister, and so that I may live because of you." Right? So he's like, "Don't tell him you're my wife. Tell him you're my sister, and you're going to save my life." And so I was kind of thinking about the associations, family associations, family ties, how basically how precious my family ties are to me, and how um, those relationships are just so they run so deep. And so that's why this one is called "Tell Them You Are My Sister."
Wonderful. Wonderful. Let's advance. Is there a detail on this next?
There is a detail. This detail is more a technique detail for all of any of you paint people out there. A lot of people think my work from far away is photo represent, like they think it's really tight and detailed. But I kind of wanted to show this looseness. It's very little detail. It's very I more imply and then really record the details. So that's what this detail is for.
Sure, sure. And before you get in, go to the next image. Before you get into the backstory of this particular work, can you talk a little bit about your process and technique, and like how do you approach, how do you approach these images? How are you referencing family photos? Are you referencing other media? Are you starting with sketches? Can you just talk a little bit about how you arrive at the finished work?
For sure. I think it's a little bit of both. Right now, I'm in a process of only representing my family since the work is very autobiographical. Um, Sometimes it's a direct photo that I see and it just sparks an emotion, and sometimes it's a posed photograph. So this composition we're looking at right here is actually a, a posed photograph that I put together. And it doesn't, my paintings don't come to me as complete works usually. That first one did, but they don't. I usually have a feeling. Someone asked me recently, they said, "What does this painting mean?" And I was like, "Oh, I paint it so I don't have to talk about it." I think most artists would say something like that. And so it's hard to know what starts the process. It's usually in some kind of meditative state where I'm really digging into my soul and trying to answer some questions. And then because I'm a visual person, an image comes to mind, and I want to chase that image because I'm like, oh, that image came to mind. That's interesting. I want to follow that to its conclusion. And so in this case, I was thinking again about a motherhood, and this is actually my sister holding her 8-day-old baby and her other two children. And there had been some situations surrounding that that kind of brought that on. But um, so yeah, does that answer the question?
Sure. Yeah, certainly it does. It does. So tell us, so you kind of gave a little bit of background on this particular work. Is there anything else you'd like to share about this painting?
Um, I think a lot of my work is good, as you're going to see, is very feminine forward. I think for me personally, a lot of times where I've seen like spiritual or divine portrayals, it's very masculine.
Mm,
And if we're familiar with this is a title of a song called "Oh Come, Let Us Adore Him." and the baby that's being held is a girl. And so in my head, I kind of flip that around, and it reads to me, "Oh, come, let us adore her." Because I found that there's so much divinity and power, not only in femininity, but in motherhood, that I did not understand before until I became a mother. So, and then of course you have this, crowd of people watching. Um, and so that's what this painting means.
Great, great. Let's advance.
Okay, there's a detail too of the crowd. Again, the detail's a little bit more of technique focused.
Hmm.
The way that I layer figures in loosely, it's not very tight because it's more, it's a design element, but it's also, I don't want it to be like in your face, like this is a crowd of people, it's more focused on shape and contrast and balance.
Sure, sure.
This piece is really special to me. This is actually a painting of my parents from the 70s, as you can tell by their outfits. um, my parents are incredibly amazing and special people. And back in the day, a little bit of background on them. Back in the day, my mother's Mexican, as obviously my dad's Black. And them being together was a taboo situation. And that was, my mother was actually disowned by her father when she chose my dad. And so there was kind of a separation there for a time, and it's very painful. So it was kind of my parents against the world. Um, and so they came from, not, my mother did not come from a great family life. My dad was just, a country boy from Alabama. And I think what is really extraordinary about them was their love. And so this, of course, is called New Nation because I feel when I was thinking about them and thinking about where they come from and how they beat the odds, and they raised 12 children um, who are in their own right extraordinary humans. And I think the greatest testament is that they are still very much in love with each other, and a massive example to me of how I want to end well. And so, yeah, this piece is about them.
Well, incredible. And can you talk a little bit about your choice? This seems to definitely be sort of religious iconography, or at least harkening back. Like I'm reading like stained glass, or I'm reading,
Mhm.
the church seems to loom large. Um, are you making references to things that you remember from your childhood, or are these images, meaning the what I'll call stained glass behind them? Is that from something that's from real life or from your imagination?
This is from my imagination. I've always loved, even as a child, I love cathedrals and chapels. I love the ornate spaces built for worship in any religion, whether it's a mosque, a temple, a church. Spaces built for worship when they're heavily ornate, when there's a lot of craftsmanship put into them, have always been so profound to me that whoever it was at any time in the world felt so moved to immortalize this human search for God. And so I find all of those things really powerful. And so when I think of stained glass, I think of us, inside this temple looking out, and there's this light and this color, and the sun is shining through. And somehow this man-made artistic object is transports us to another place
Hmm.
where we feel that we can reach beyond. And so stained glass showed up a lot in my work last year. I'm kind of moving away from that this year, but um, that's kind of what that signified to me, is this sacredness behind these very ordinary situations.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's advance. Is there detail or yeah,
Detail in that, again, I love this. I love the bottom of this painting. The spontaneity and the looseness was something I really loved. So I put the detail of that in there. um, this is a portrait of me specifically. Um, it's very, this whole journey of this more recent work has been interesting because I've always been very uncomfortable with painting myself, and I don't like pictures being taken of me. I've just, it's always been an interesting relationship with that. And so going on this exploratory journey of, um, you know, my journey of becoming, I found myself being drawn a lot to images of myself or wanting to portray myself, not as I was, but of who I wanted to be.
Mm,
And the person I wanted to embody. And this is called Wealthy. My name is Jessica, and that means wealthy. So it's kind of a play on my own name. But what this was really about was the harnessing of our own darkness and our shadows. And I think a lot of times we're taught to be afraid of what lies in the shadows, even in ourselves. And this was a period of time where I was bringing everything out into the light and exploring what that meant to find balance within yourself, within the darkness and the light, and using the darkness not as something to run from, but as an element of power. And so that is what this painting is about.
We had a question come in. What's your process for color grading or choosing color palettes in your painting?
Oh, very good question. I stick to a very simple palette, actually. I stick to about 5 colors, and a lot of these paintings are what I call they're like math equations on how to get a certain visual in my head by using the colors I've chosen. So I do a lot of glazing. So underneath these figures is a normal skin color. I would paint it as if it was just a portrait, using that limited palette. And then to get that ethereal kind of distant look, I do lots and lots of glazing. I hope that answers your question.
Sure, sure does. Let's advance.
Okay. There's no detail on that one. Again, this one is called White as Snow. This
Quite different
is,
from the other works.
pardon?
It seems quite different from the other works, like the relief of the images to the background. Maybe we can talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so if you could see in the former, the figure is going to be glazed red, right? Because it was and then this one, I glazed the figures with titanium white. Specifically, so I was raised in a Mennonite adjacent community. Um, we were the only Black family within our community for miles and miles around. So um, this painting's a little more personal in the fact that I grew up um, desperately trying to blend in with a group of people that we could never blend in with. I mean, we always stuck out like a sore thumb, like you literally. And so the glazing of titanium white kind of ghosts the figures out. It dulls them, it pushes them back. And I wanted to show more of this. You're just kind of a posed poster of what you're supposed to be instead of actively possessing your authenticity. And so this is from a family portrait of me and my siblings when we were still very much in the community.
Super, super. Let's advance.
Again, there is a detail because I love these loose pieces that they're not fleshed out at all, actually. And I love just picking in little bits of the flesh color and the clothing and kind of leaving a lot of blank negative space. So I really enjoy that towards in this painting.
It's important to show. Sure.
Yeah, yeah, process. It doesn't always have to be finished to completion, right? I just finish it. It's done when it's done. In anticipation of love, this is a painting that was inspired by a photograph of me when I believe I was maybe 6 or 7, on an Easter morning. The back it's all completely fabricated, just from my imagination. Those people were not sitting behind me, but I was thinking about how much of our selves we put on as a costume, for no nefarious reason, other than we really want to be loved. Um, we seek connection and we want to be loved. So this is kind of that exploration of um, what what am I currently putting on and entering into, and in anticipation of love.
Hmm.
It's more of a question than an answer.
Hmm. Hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Let's advance. And I think there's a detail on here. Yeah.
There is a detail, more for this little baby in the back. I really, I feel like art in this form is it feels very voyeuristic, right? Because I feel like I'm just bearing my soul all over the canvas. And so a lot of times this watching aspect is me trying to deal with the vulnerability of what I'm putting on the canvas and knowing people are watching. So when you have these like figures in the background watching, it's literally me processing, wow, I'm putting this out there. This feels really vulnerable. I feel really bare. Everyone's watching. How does that feel? And so it's
Right.
literally incorporated into the painting.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Great work. Great work.
Thank you.
So we're in our final 15 minutes, just kind of giving a heads up to everyone that's here. We did have that great question that came in. So if anyone else has any questions, don't wait to the final couple of minutes because we will not have time. So let's advance to the next, Jessica.
Awesome. Baptized in Dark Waters, one of my favorites again. Again, we are talking about that balancing of light and darkness. And I think here I was addressing trauma, and how in this day and age of spirituality, we're all trying to erase it, suppress it, run away from it. And I feel like the greatest parts of myself came from the dark water, and embracing the fullness of what we are, that we are not just the parts that are shiny and above. We are the sum of the whole, and that is worthy. And it makes us, if we let it, it can make us better.
That is very true. It's very true. Um, yeah, I think we have maybe about 8 more slides. So let's make sure we get through them.
Okay, let's moving on. Again, exploring that journey of motherhood, that sacrificial. Um, Suddenly you're bare, right? This figure, I'm using myself, but this figure is in this kind of this skimpy black dress. She's in no shape to be protecting anyone, but here I am with my children under my wing, and though the birds in the background are they could either be predator or angel. It doesn't really matter. I was just kind of exploring that. What does that mean to be completely vulnerable and you feel broken, but then this person in you rises and there's nothing you wouldn't do to keep your children safe, or whatever, whoever's in your care, and that kind of the courage of the guardian.
Hmm.
Anyone who is a guardian, it doesn't have to be a parent, but any guardian, and what that feels like, that no matter what situation you're in, you're going to give your life to protect the people that you swore to keep safe. So that's what that's about. If
Super.
you want me to slow down, just let me know. I'm just going to keep going. Is that fine?
No, you can keep going because I have a few more questions I'd like to ask before we conclude today. So, but I want to make sure we get through the images as well.
For sure. Also, again, we're exploring that spiritual narrative of discovering that divine, that hidden, that light. As you can see, there's a little light in that child's hand. That's me and my daughter. And this was inspired by, again, I harken back to, I was raised on the Bible. That's all I ever read. So anytime I'm thinking, it's usually Bible verses floating through my head. So there's a verse that says, "The people that sat in darkness saw a great light." And I was just exploring that. And of course, it comes up visually. And so that is what this painting um, was exploring there.
Thank you for that, Jessica. You know what I would like to do? Because we're down to the final 5 minutes, could we advance to slide number 23?
I don't see my numbers. So will you just tell me when to stop?
Installation view. It's after this. One more, this one.
Hmm.
Because I definitely did not want to not be able to talk about this work.
Mm, okay. Awesome. This, where two or more are gathered, this is a triptych of the uh, first moments my second daughter came into the world. Um, wow. So I had both of my children at home. And so I went through that whole process of natural childbirth, which again, that's not for everyone. Um, but for me, it was wow, truly transformative in every way. And so kind of showing there that and I'm going to use the word violence, um, that violent moment of me coming to the end of what I thought was my human threshold of what I could bear in pain. And then moments later, there was this writhing child on my chest. And again, the title is inspired by a verse in the Bible. It says, "Where two or more are gathered, God is there." And um, yeah, pretty powerful. Yeah.
Wow,
Uh,
wow. I think we have some close, details of this work a bit closer. Yeah, so let's.
yeah. So I would say my experience in childbirth was probably akin to other people's, I would say psychedelic, when people have these psychedelic experiences where they meet God in a really real way. And I never knew how strong I was or how much of the divine lived within me until I gave birth to my children. And it was a powerful, transformative moment. And as you can see, the cord is still hooked in. And, I've got the midwife's hand. She literally grabs my baby, puts it on my chest. And I go from this first one here, you can't really see because the face is obscured because the face wasn't really important, but my chin is up and I'm literally screaming in pain. And then the next literally seconds, these photos were taken in six like seconds of each other. It all just stops. And all of a sudden I'm just like, oh my God, and this baby. And then the third one is just me just holding that baby to my chest. And like I said, one of the most transformative moments of my life was giving birth to my children. And so it's deeply personal, and really powerful. And I think displays that moment of a woman's life to me with dignity and but also with that harshness of what's actually happening. It's not to me, it's not pastel and flowers. It was like me screaming life into the world in the most raw and raw way. So that's what these pieces are about.
Thank you for sharing that. I think
Thank
that's
you.
a fantastic image to end the slideshow on because I think you've kind of said it all.
Thank you.
So we're down to the final couple of minutes. I do have one of my own questions, and we had another question come in. So you can stop the slide presentation. And then,
Awesome.
um, so someone asked, who, if anyone, do you look to for feedback on your work? Um, they're an abstract painter and they crave feedback, but they said your work is so personal. They wonder, do you feel like feedback is necessary or even helpful?
Yes and no. I don't think it is necessary to be if it's an exploration of your soul, why? Well, if you're getting something out, get it out. But I do, I get my gallerist, and then honestly, when my kids come in and say, "Wow, mommy, that is a beautiful painting," I know that I'm on the right track for me. But I don't think feedback, um, mm, that's a hard one, honestly, because I think the answer is yes and no. I do.
Well, I mean, just to interject my own opinion on that, um, there's technical feedback that can always be helpful to anyone, but then there's also feedback that's around the creative process that could be like more or less helpful, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and So if someone, for example, if you enter an artist studio that you know and they've just begun their journey as a painter, they have a lot of ideas, but maybe they don't know how to prime a canvas properly, right? Or maybe they don't know. I mean, again, there's all sorts of technical things. Giving them some technical advice like, hey, you should let that dry all night before you start painting. That's very different than telling someone what to paint, right? So,
Absolutely.
right. And anyone who like is opposed to technical advice, well, good luck to you.
Seriously, good luck to you. So I would say that, with what you just said in mind, for that artist who's asking that question, I would find an artist you respect, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's in person. I've done this. Ask for a studio visit. Ask for an honest critique. And if you're actually open and can take an honest critique from a professional who's been doing it a long time, definitely do it. I know that some artists are resistant to that, but they're not necessarily commenting on your subject matter. They're commenting on your process, which those two things can be very different.
Right, right. And there are a lot of artists that again we've heard of and admire over the decades who their work was criticized to death. Like the people hated it. They didn't understand it, they didn't get it. And then, 20 years later, they're a genius. Everyone's, oh, they're such a genius. Right. So there's also like the audience and context also
Hmm.
plays.
Hmm.
Um, everyone's journey is different. Cliche to say, but people say it because it's true.
It's the
Um,
truth.
the other question that came in is, I love seeing your work. And what is your next direction for you and your work? And you have any exhibitions coming up anytime soon?
Oh, that's a good question. I do have multiple exhibitions coming up. The most eminent one opens at the end of March at the South Dallas Cultural Center. It's going to be a solo exhibition. Again, we're on this exploratory journey of the soul and a lot of narrative work, but technically, I'm exploring using the figure more in a rhythmic manner and not so much straight portraiture. So that's kind of where I'm leaning towards. How do I turn the body into rhythm? And I think there was a slide that kind of showed that earlier where there were those repetitive figures over and over again. I'm kind of into that repetitive motion. I'm not sure what I'm doing with it yet, but that's what the process I'm exploring at the moment.
That's wonderful. Well, my final question before we conclude today is, in your bio, the part that I didn't read, you mentioned having a mentor.
Mhm.
And if you could just take a moment and share, at least from your perspective, whether or not you think artists finding a mentor is important and what that meant for you as an artist.
I think mentorship is extremely important. I think it's extremely underrated these days. I don't think a lot of people think of having a mentor, but having a mentor changed my life. I think without her, I would not be. uh, yeah, I would not be where I am today. And yeah, she passed away. I wish she could be here.
She's here.
Yeah. But yes, yes, finding a mentor is extremely important. I think it's an honor if you find a younger artist who comes up under you and wants to be mentored by you. I think that's an incredible honor, and I think seeking out mentors is something we should do. Yeah.
Well, she's here through your work.
Yes, she is. And I inherited her studio when she passed away in 2021. And so I'm literally using her colors, like it's her
See?
paintbrushes,
See?
and man, she'd be tickled to death if she was here
And
today.
what is her name? Her name?
Dr. Marilyn Todd Daniels.
Yeah, well, she's still here. And the work
Yeah,
that you is a testament to how much of a powerful impact she had on your life. Jessica, I
yeah,
want to thank you for today. Thank you for your openness and your
thank you.
vulnerability and your honesty and generosity. It really means a lot to me. I think it meant a lot to everyone who joined us for today's program. Wonderful way for me to start my day. Again, I really do appreciate it. I'll see you the next time I'm in Dallas. I want to wish everyone during this wild time that the world is going through. Peace and safety and love. Everyone have a great night.
Yes. Thank you all. Thank you.